and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Volume 8, Number 9 of the Constromart Knowledge and Experience series. Thank you for joining us this early. We appreciate your commitment to continuous learning as part of this amazing community. Today's session focuses on a topic that every engineer, professional, regardless of discipline, needs but often doesn't get formal training in: financial management for engineers and professionals. Whether you are managing a project budget, running a consultancy, or planning your own financial future, understanding the basis of financial decision-making can make a huge difference. Today's conversation will help us bridge the gap between technical and financial so that we can make smarter choices in our projects and in our personal lives. Today, it's a pleasure to introduce our guest for this morning's discussion. We have here with us Mr. Nicholas Carl Clark. Nicholas is the Investment Ecosystem Development Manager at Renewed Capital, where he supports firms' expansion in Ghana through strategic engagement across investment and development ecosystem. He plays a central role in managing and executing private sector consulting and development projects, ensuring effective coordination and delivery. He also contributes to gender-smart programming and supports the full cycle of investment pipeline development, from opportunity sourcing to due diligence and deal selection. In short, Nicholas brings to us strong blend of financial expertise, project experience, and developmental insights, making him the perfect person to lead us through today's conversation. If you're on the call, Nicholas, you are welcome, and I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Jacqueline. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all so much for making the time. I understand it's 7 a.m. and people run through different routines, especially at this time. So I appreciate you taking time off your busy schedules to be here. Yeah, do I just dive in or
Yes, you can dive in. Let me know if you would want to share a presentation so that I stop sharing and allow you access to do that.
Fantastic. I would love to share a presentation, hopefully very brief.
Thank you.
Cool. Give me one sec. Awesome. And yes, thank you all so much again. The goal is simple. I'm not here to make you accountants in any regard. Your work is just as important, and the goal is to at least create that level of self-awareness, just to be able to see certain things, be able to identify certain things, and put a name to certain things. So I have this simple thing I like to say, and I adapted it from somewhere, where I like to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So in my opinion, the goal is to get you aware, and then you'll be able to measure it, and then eventually be able to manage it as the stellar professionals you are already. So moving on, yeah, this is me. My name is Nicholas Clark. I work with Renew Capital. We are basically an investment firm, continental investment firm. We're present in about 13 countries. And given their very lean model, I'm representing the company in Ghana. And we've done a few investments already in the country, and we're looking to do a few more. It's been an exciting journey with them. And the goal is to, as much as possible, do a lot of damage, and by damage, good damage, where we're supposed to push the ecosystem to grow, not just for us to just come and pick a few companies to invest in, as our mandate is, of course, startup investing. So yeah, without taking too much of your time, I'm just going to dive right into the agenda. So yeah, for this session, the goal is to look at it from two sides. So we're going to take first the project finance part of it, and then we take the personal finance part of it. So the goal is to at least get both insights. I'll spend barely 10 minutes on the project side because that's your field, and frankly, I'm not here to teach. I would love to learn from you if we have enough time after the call. And then the goal is to now focus on you as a person and how you manage your cash flow, your risks. Because working for an investment firm comes with a ton of challenges. Cash flow is not as simple as working in, say, an NGO or a bank where the money just sits there and end of the month, they're just deductions. Sometimes your clients are not paying you on time, and all these have snowballing effects on you, on your family, and generally for the company as well, where it's a very stressful situation. And then the goal is to touch on the four anchors of, in my opinion, of course, the four anchors of personal finance strength. And then we break that down into cash flow, budgeting, we'll touch on emergency funds. We'll touch on simple tools for investing. We'll not do too much of investing today. Unfortunately, we could do it another time. But we'll touch on those concepts and hopefully we come up, well, we always come away with something, but the goal is to come up with at least one thing we don't know or one insight, which before this call felt was a bit mundane, but maybe me saying it just makes it seem a little more important than it should be. And yeah, aside that, thank you all for your attention, and I'm diving right into the presentation. So yes, in terms of money, I see it as two worlds, especially for your field. Other fields will probably have different types of worlds, but for your field, I see money coming in two shapes, where you have the project finance side of things, and then you have the personal finance side of things. So in terms of project finance, essentially that's what you're doing, your budgeting, your costing, different kinds of reports, variation orders, cash flows, procurement, challenges, suppliers, reporting. And then for personal finance, you have things like budgeting, and obviously savings, which feels a bit mundane. But then you realize when we get to the end of the month and we are always crawling, it's hardly an income problem. Sometimes it's more of a management problem where we didn't just manage the little we had at the time we had them. And then we just look generally at long-term stability and long-term strategies. Hopefully that would be where I get a lot of engagement from you in terms of questions, in terms of ideas, just to share with everybody and to be able to appreciate and understand the concepts just a little better. Yes. So in my opinion, I tend to see a project as a business, and certain indicators almost make it easy to spot a business because businesses have revenue, businesses have costs, expenses, businesses have different cash flow cycles, businesses have to keep an eye on their profit margin as well. And depending on the industry you're in, you're either exposed to a high level of risk or you're exposed to very low levels of risk in terms of operations, in terms of financing, in terms of investing. And also, projects, I'm sure you go through several layers of approval and corporate governance just to make sure things are airtight. There are a lot of controls, minimizing as many of the risks in your field as possible. And that's how I see generally what a project is. So if I were to look at what you do, I assume you're all entrepreneurs in your own right, given that you manage projects, you manage different budgets, you manage different cycles, and you're supposed to ensure a very optimum output for an entrepreneur or for the fish farmer next to you. Essentially, that's what they do on a daily basis. So, yeah, so in my opinion, why financial management matters is, and well, I hate reading the entire slide, so I'll just be picking a few slides, or a few points from each slide, and then hopefully that ends up making a lot of sense to qualify the entire slide. So I just say if you have money, you're a lot more peaceful. Uh, si confident if you have it and you're confident you have it, you get a lot more clarity. You're a lot more confident. You're a lot more easy to talk to, easy to be with, because stress and cortisol-induced stress is from all that heavy load on your mind, and most of the time it comes from having to make decisions with different types of scenarios at the same time. So well, this is not something to say on a call, but I'm assuming you are thinking of leaving the company and you look at your bank account and you know the company is probably hurting you. You would essentially sit where you're sitting and still work essentially still for the company because you cannot make an effective decision based on your personal finance stress or your personal finance problems. And in my opinion, anybody can be somebody who grows wealth from a 9 to 5. The dream is so that it's only entrepreneurship where you end up becoming rich, but I'm sure you look around and you've seen a few rich people who've worked their asses off just to be able to become rich. And most times, the wealth they build doesn't come from the actual 9 to 5. The 9 to 5 affords them a level of predictability in terms of income. But then, based on the strategies they take with that income, with that time, they're able to build long-term financial security. So, yes, in terms of your first line of defense as a company, project budgeting, in setting up a budget, you're essentially preparing for the future. The future is uncertain, the future is tricky. But then if you're able to map out what exactly you're going to spend on, what exactly you're going to get your money, and especially the timing at which you're going to get your money, it's easy to make certain assumptions that essentially drive business decisions. So probably in 2026, management will come and say, hey, this is our target for the year. This is how much we think it's going to cost. This is where we're going to get our revenue from. And this is how we're going to execute, and hopefully you execute on that quarter by quarter, or you decide to measure it biannually if you need to. But most of the time, get to your budget is essentially your first line of any, excuse my French, any shit happening on the day or throughout the entire project's life cycle. But then the question is, what exactly makes a budget feel proof or what exactly breaks it? So budgets are based on assumptions. So like I said, your management comes to you next year with a target, with means to the target and a plan to how to get to that target. But then different things happen throughout the year. So you have, first of all, price volatility, yesterday price, no be today price. So the goal is how do we measure all these things and encompass that into a very fail-safe budget. Like I said, I'm not here to teach you accounting. I'm not here to show you anything related to what your accountant is doing. If he's on the call, big ups to him. But then my goal is just to give you that level of insight that goes into all these decision-making skills. And then for you as a person, you'll be able to execute in your own right and in your own regard. So then another thing is ignored risk factors. So you did a project for the government and you were owed a bit of money, and then there happened to be a change of government. You did not plan for that change of government to happen because you assumed the government was doing a hell of a job, and all of a sudden people just decided to vote them out. So in my opinion, that's a risk factor which you should have factored in terms of how you get the money, the timing for the money, etc. But obviously the realities on the ground are much, much more different where it feels like you had a 30-day receivable period where you're supposed to receive your monies within 30 days. But knowing how government contracts go, it could take anywhere between 6 months to 2 years because there's a whole queue of approval processes. At the Ministry of Finance, they have to approve different things. I hate to say it, but then you have to talk to a few people in a very special way, just be able to get few favors for things you've earned, which is, in my opinion, very annoying. But that's what essentially breaks all these flows you have. So your first line of defense is your budget, but all these things could break your budget if your assumptions are not clear and you're not at least seeing to be able to measure these risks and then incorporating them into your budget. So yes, now we've done budgeting. The goal is to now move it to your cost control. There's so many puns about ships and whatnot, but my pick is small leaks sink ships. In my opinion, you would assume scope creep where the customer or the client says, "Oh, I just need a little modification here. I just need a little thing here. I just need a little thing there." But over time, these things pile up, and unfortunately, as they pile up, they become cost centers for you as a business. So let me take a vivid example. You design the structure. Mind you, in terms of your engineering, I don't know which sector in engineering you're doing. I'm just going to assume built environment, houses, etc. So you build the foundation to a structure, and then the client comes and says, well, I didn't know this is what it would look like. Could you just break down this wall a bit and then just extend the sitting room to look a little larger? Because in terms of the drawing, it looked good, but now I'm standing in the space and I don't think this is how big a sitting room I want. I want a much bigger one. So all these things just they creep into the business. And in my opinion, your job is not exactly to manage the entire flow of money in and out of the business or in and out of the project, because again, that's your accountant's job or your team, your finance team's job. But yours is to catch these things, the warning signs, the flags where scope creep is coming up. You realize that certain red flags are popping up in the business where now supplier prices are changing ever so rapidly. But the earlier you catch it, the quicker you can at least pivot or you can modify a few strategies to ensure that the project is going to be delivered. Because most times it's hardly because of the skill or the technical team's fault. It's usually just a cash flow problem where just costs were not exactly seen, and it made it very problematic for project managers to execute properly, because then what happens if there's not enough money to do what you said you want to do? It becomes a whole thing, and the goal is to at least be visible of these little leaks and, in my opinion, to note them down, because eventually when you keep writing these little changes, you have a paper trail, you have a whole lot of information, a lot of data, which will eventually drive your decision making for the next project, or will inform management of how certain projects or how certain things are going, and they can in turn take good decisions to ensure that you can at least achieve your goals optimally, and they can also earn their revenues as a business. Yes, so cash flow. Back to my government analogy, where it doesn't even have to be government, just most cycles or most accounting people will tell you you pay the people you owe as late as you want, and you take the money you need from people who owe you as fast as you have to. Most accountants are not exactly excited to let money go. It's not their money, but their managers of that money. And their financial prudence will ensure that the business should have cash flow at every point in time. So for you in Constromart, for example, if you had a contract and you were supposed to be paid, say maybe 49 days or 50 days post the completion of the project, it's the accountant's job in that company to ensure that if they could stretch it to about 60 days, they should, because they have to ensure their company has enough liquidity for any shocks that may come their way. So payment delays, in my opinion, are very normal in the construction space. In terms of milestones, these are usually multi-year projects, so everything changes almost monthly or almost biannually, and then all these type of milestones. So once a 2-year project, it's now a 4-year project, because it's longer to get certain things for certain things. Paperwork takes a while. Approval processes for certain or from certain government agencies take some time. And then the longer this goes on, the more liquidity goes into the business, and the more consumer has to find, say, a buffer, or they have to find another set of money. Sometimes companies actually sell their working capital needs. So they ask actor, well, what do you call them, factors or factoring, where they give off their receivables and then they essentially get cash flow in. And usually it's at a premium. So you lose about 20% of the value of those receivables. But these are all interventions people have to take just to be able to keep the lights on in the business, and to not essentially go out of business because of your money being locked up in multiple projects. So yeah, and then we dive into the risk and value of decision making. So yeah, project value, like I said, not here to teach you anything in accounting, but your project value is based on the financial value of the project, the technical value, which is essentially the technical team, and then all the things needed to make that project a success, materials and the like. And then we have the time value. Essentially, you would calculate that depending on where you're standing, forward or backwards, to be able to, I wouldn't say judge accurately, but just to get a sense for what the time value of your money is in a project. And then the rest is just your strategic value. But common risks, I see, and I'm sure you have a lot more given that you work on the ground, working with actual clients, working on actual projects. And this is just me sitting here, assuming these are actual risks you face. So I stand corrected. Hopefully, I get corrected at the end as well. But then price escalation from suppliers. You agree a certain price, you get there tomorrow, you built your budget on this price, and then essentially it changes. and then you have to rework the entire process and find a new supplier who you hope will not change his or her price at some point. And then back to the scope creep again, where the scope changes ever so slightly, willy-nilly, to be honest. It's hardly structured, it's hardly pinpointed, but then unfortunately you have to satisfy your client. So as you agree on something, obviously there'll be changes along the way, and how you manage these changes essentially make up your risk and the value you provide to the customer. Client delays essentially is just either payments or certain feedback they're supposed to give you. I once remember a friend of mine who was building, she's an architect, and now she says she's trying to get to the owner to get a few details just to make sure they're a bit airtight on certain decisions. And the owner says, I'm sorry, my mother died, so I just need just a few weeks or a few months just to be able to grieve, and handle a few family issues. And this is, I'm sure you can imagine, those few weeks have a snowball effect on you, your suppliers, the people you have to work with, the people you are employing to work for you on the ground. And all these things create different levels of delay, which are inevitable. It was very unfortunate that the person lost his mom, but it's inevitably serious to you as a project manager as well, where it affects your output and your delivery. And weather and environmental factors, I don't need to touch on that. It's pretty obvious where we are in Ghana. Our rain was supposed to be patterned at some point, but now it's a bit erratic. You have, I'm looking outside, it's a bit bright today, but I have no idea what could happen in the next, 5 hours. So yes, all these are risks that are factored into your decision making. But yeah, we've now looked at the first world, which is of project finance, your financing with your projects, with the company, with Constromart. But now it's about you as the person, as the individual. And like I mentioned in the beginning, personal finance definitely opens up a world of good for you. Now you can, and I hate to say this again on the call with Constromart management, but now you can ask for a salary increment with a lot more conviction, because you don't need a certain level of income when you get to a certain level of income. So you have enough savings, you have enough buffer, you can now ask for things with a level of confidence you should. Probably you've been owed a few promotions, a few salary increments for a while, but then given your financial state, not because of your income level, but given your financial state because of different personal factors, your confidence at work has taken a hit, because you would hate to piss off your manager, who would think about firing you if you are in his or her way. But then this essentially gives you the foundation you need for your own personal life, for your family, depending on how many of you have kids, for your kids, and for their future as well. Yes, so these are my four anchors. So as a person, you should have some level of cash flow discipline. And by cash flow discipline, if you play that into your business, if you play that into you as a project manager or as an engineer, you realize how tight it is for money to just flow about anyhow. The money budgeted for certain people, for certain supplies, for certain things, stick to those suppliers, stick to those people, stick to those things. So it's very important to have that level of discipline where your cash flow, even if in the worst case scenario, goes out a lot more frequently than it should, you're at least documenting these things. Because you remember what I mentioned in the beginning, what you can't measure, you can't manage. So in as much as you can't see it, you realize that you are taking a good salary, but you are no better in terms of liquidity at the end of the month than a national service personnel, because then you're always crawling to the end of the month. And it's not a terrible, terrible thing. It's not the end of the world, but it's not optimal, because in the event where there's a bit of a minor shock, you could go into shock, because essentially you don't have enough money for certain things that might spring up. And it's very hard to justify. You've been working for 10, 20 years and you still don't have enough money for certain things. Yeah, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough to justify. The next point is, in my opinion, budgeting clarity. And I'm sure you realize for most of these concepts, it's two sides of a coin in your professional world and then in your personal world, and they mirror each other as much as possible. So, in as much as you look into your company and how you manage your money, you should, if it's a good one as well, you should try and mirror the strategies you see at work into your personal life. So you realize your company is very lean, make expenses when they have to, not too extravagant, etc., etc. You try to mirror that into your lifestyle where you don't overdo things, you don't overspend, you don't become overly extravagant. And how you do this is just being aware of your budget. You put a spending cap per month, and then from that you execute on that. There's a thing I like to say, which I'll look on in the final few slides, is you should always pay yourself first when you're setting your budget. So you put some money where you say, hey Nick, this is my salary and this is how much I'm giving to you. Could be 10%, could be 20%. And that becomes my savings because that's money I'm giving to myself first. And then the rest is I face my front. I look at what the month has to offer. I line out all the things I expect to pay for. The obvious things are rent, electricity, etc. But then things creep up, fuel, car breakages, different things happen. Your son could have jumped off the fifth floor at school, broken his shoulder, that's something you have to pay for. And obviously, hopefully, if your kid grows up, your kid can also pay for his or her negligence. And then you set up your emergency fund, which is just a pool of money. Some people push the emergency funds to 3 months. I prefer a 6 month period because if you look at the data, it takes a while. So in an event where you decide to quit your job for whatever reason, it could be anything. It could be you hate your boss hates you, period. You want to leave the work, which is fine, but then you should have a buffer where you can live off and manage your expenses the exact same way. And then eventually 6 months, because it takes between 3 to maybe 8 months to find a new job, depending on your industry. And 6 months gives you enough time, buys you enough time to at least make decisions. So then you don't jump on the next job in a haste or in a panic. You can make a well-informed decision and pick the right job that aligns with your future, aligns with what you're looking for, what you didn't find in your previous employment. And then the fourth one is just long-term investing. I'm not here to teach you about treasury bills, to show you all the different instruments. I could, if you need me to, we could just run through a few quick instruments which you could consider. Maybe I could show you a few tools you could use in terms of managing your long-term investment plans, how to target the S&P 500 in the US, because given that we are located in Ghana, it's important to at least buffer yourself because the city almost loses an average of 20% per year in terms of just depreciation value. So you could make 20% interest on any money, and one shift in the dollar wipes out all that gain. So we implore that people at least try to diversify. So you keep your money in dollars, it's locked up for longer, less accessible, and then you have a pool of CDs as well for much more emergent issues. But yeah, we'll eventually touch on that if there's time. So yeah, similar to the other side. So right now it's like we're looking into a mirror. We're tapping into the cash flow side, but this one is on the personal level. So in terms of cash flow, I know when I say this, somebody might throw a stone at me when they see me outside buying Kelly Willy, but it's my opinion is that it's hardly an income problem beyond a certain level. I'm not saying if you're earning a very modest amount of income, you are not going through crunches, you're not going through tight squeezes. My point is from a certain part where you're able to cover your costs, and by costs, food, roof over your head. I wouldn't call fuel as an expense that you need to have. There are always ways to work around that if life happens to you. But then, in my opinion, once you're able to eat, you're able to provide a roof over your head for you, your family, and you're able to at least provide a certain level of lifestyle to the family, that becomes your baseline. Anything after that, you are hitting above, you're punching above it. So now you are deciding that you want to change your car, you realize that you want five ACs in the house instead of the two ACs, which you were managing just fine. So all these things are different things, in my opinion, that justify my claim that it's hardly about the income, but it's more about how you manage the income. And there are different ways to do this. So, like I mentioned in the previous slide, you pay yourself first when your salary hits. I don't know how many of you have been paid yet. I haven't been paid, and I get paid one week into the next month. I know it's a very terrible system. So I missed all the Black Friday deals, and it's fine. I'll hopefully catch it some other time. And then you automate your investment and savings where if you can put standing orders on your bank accounts, just when the money hits, push this money here, push that money there. So you don't have to have that mental load of always try to remember at the end of the month that, hey, I thought I had saved already. What happened? The money should have gone into this account to be able to use for investment because with investment, like I'm sure you all know, time is essentially equal to money. So every day you waste is value you've lost in the market. And then you also could separate your expenses into monthly, weekly, annual. For annual, it's more what I wouldn't call it inspirational, but it's more things you hope to do. You hope to travel to the Maldives next year. That is part of your annual expenses. You've checked out how much a ticket will cost in September 2026. You've budgeted that, but then you've separated this level of expenses. You could buy a ticket today, and then hopefully it gets cheaper as you get closer to the month you're traveling. But then you must also keep yourself alive till you get there, you know. So for your monthly, for your weekly, you keep an eye on it, but you separate them because you would get into that false sense of planning for the future and you miss the present, or you stick too much to the present and you miss the future. So it's both sides, and hopefully the goal is to like I said, just to be more aware of these things because these are all decisions we make, these are all decisions we do. But then once you catch it, once you're aware of it, you can at least measure how much of your time goes into X, how much of your time goes into Y, how much of your money goes into X, how much of your money goes into Y. And then eventually you build up this level of habits, the muscle memory kicks in, and then in the event where one big shock comes in, you're able to at least withstand it to a large extent. I think there was something I saw online a while ago, about 2 years ago, where I don't know how true this is because I don't have the data, but the person said we are about one or two freak accidents away from poverty. And when you think about it, it hits you different. When I heard it then, I felt it because I felt, okay, so if I did get into a freak accident now and I had to spend a lot of money just to fix whatever happened, if that happens to me twice, or if it happens to somebody and me at the same time, I could lose my entire income. I could lose everything because then, because of this accident, my job might have to lay me off. Of course, they wouldn't lay you off immediately because lawsuits, but eventually they'll start looking for replacements because they need their work to be done as well. And then now your emergency fund or your emergency savings keeps going into fixing all these things. And when you hear stuff like that, it's a bit jarring because things happen to people. And it's important to at least be as aware and be as protected on your way to certain things or as you're going through life. And yeah. Let's move to the next slide before I just stick to this one. Budgeting, personal budgeting. For your business, it's your business's first line of defense. For you, it's your control system. It's where you manage everything. I personally have an Excel sheet. I didn't build this from scratch because in this age, how many things do we build from scratch apart from engineering projects and buildings, of course. But I just downloaded a template online. You could easily go to your Google Sheet and just type you want a budget sheet, easy to use. You can actually track your expenses in real time. And the goal about budgeting or the goal about these types of monitoring and evaluation tools for personal finance is, in my opinion, it's not supposed to feel like a restriction. It's more about giving you direction and clarity. So then now you know what to look out for. You know things you need to do. You prevent things like lifestyle creep. So Jacqueline, for example, must have gotten a promotion in the next month, and all of a sudden, Jacqueline decides that her iPhone 16 is not good enough. Does not want to sell the iPhone 16, but just wants to get a 17 tomorrow. In my opinion, that's lifestyle creep. All of a sudden, the regular shoes you've been wearing are not good enough, and then now she wants to buy red bottom heels, probably cost $2,000. But what is money, right? And then she decides to buy it because now she's making more money from her promotion or from a new gig or a new job she got, and now she feels she's liquid. That is what I call a lifestyle creep because you were fine with your heels. Your heels they were not broken, they were not messed up. They looked good, they felt good. But now a, a woman of your liquidity feels, yeah, I need red bottom heels. I've earned it. I work for my money and it's my money. It's mine to spend. But then the problem is end of the month, and then you are just like me, struggling to the end of the month, and it frankly does not make any sustainable sense because then if you keep doing that, you're no different from the person who's earning 1/10 of your salary. Because then both of you are all struggling just to complete the month and hope for the next payment cycle, which is a very terrible position to be in. And then next is for personal budgeting, you can actually budget debt into your monthly expenses. We don't like debt as a culture, which is fine, but the more you go into businesses, the more you understand debt is actually supposed to help you. Mortgages, all these things, these are all external capital that is helping you create more value in today's terms. So left to you alone, you probably have done this in 5 years, but then extra capital coming in, which is usually in the form of debt, allows you to do this faster. But if you take debt to live life, is where the problem hits. So very controversial topic is borrowing to get married. Controversial in different ways. Some people think it's fine because they can pay back. I don't think it's fine in any shape or form. Financial prudence, nothing in my mind. When I hear that, I just hear alarm bells ringing. And I always pray for the couple that you don't spend your first 5 years suffering to pay off a loan you do not have to incur. And then something I call invisible micro spending, where it's your budget was to spend, say, 1,000 cities on data and airtime. And all of a sudden, you are out here making international calls for no reason at all, really. It's not for an emergency. It's not to call for support to do anything. It's not for your business. It's not for learning. It's just to vibe with your friend. But that was not in your budget. Your budget was to stick to 1,000 cities for data and airtime for the month of December. So you going through and you're like, hey, it's what's an extra 500 cities? But an extra 500 cities 10 times becomes 5,000 cities, which you could have used for a 10% treasury bill. Treasury bill is about 11 to 13 currently. You could make some money at the end of the year. It could compound, get you more money. But it's like all these are the micro things. So you look back and you're like, hey, I make a lot of money or I make decent amount of money, but then why am I still struggling on a monthly basis? It's because there's no budgeting to keep you direct or to keep you focused on achieving certain goals. So now I'm focused on the goals. I have my budget. I have to build my emergency fund. Emergency fund, like I mentioned, 3 to 6 months. I optimize for 6. If you can, optimize for 8 or 9. But then emergency fund essentially, I'm not going to read the entire slide, but then emergency fund will essentially allow you to live the life you're living in the absence of the cash flow you are getting, depending on what you're doing. Whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you're a 9 to 5 worker, the goal is to be at least keep up your lifestyle for that period as you seek out alternatives or as you make life-changing decisions. So you could be a 9 to 5 worker who now says, I want to go into fish farming. But then your emergency fund allows you to take that level of risk because you would obviously go in with a ton of things to learn. And then eventually it could work or it might not work, but you should be able to start again. And in building this emergency fund, you could use software for that, but you have to be realistic with yourself. If you cheat yourself, you cheat your emergency fund. If you are overly excited about your emergency fund, it takes you too long to actually execute because then you spend too much time just trying to build it. Pick your actual expenses. So you pick your core expenses, your rent, your food, your water, maybe a little bit of travel to visit the family, depending on how close you are to the family, school fees if you have children, if you're a guardian to other children, all those things. So you factor all those realistic costs. Don't add DSTV, in my opinion. DSTV is a luxury at this point. I'm fine if you come for me after the call, but then I feel like DSTV is a luxury if you have other cheaper variations. Netflix is much cheaper than DSTV these days. Netflix plus Amazon Prime would be cheaper than DSTV on a monthly basis. So there are always substitutes for these type of products, but then just be realistic with yourself in terms of your expenses. If you feel you can't do without DSTV, that becomes your core expense. add it to your emergency fund target. So you can at least quantify and say, hey, I spent 5,000 CDs on staying alive on a monthly basis. Let's forget gifts. Let's forget new shirts, new shoes. If I had all my equipment, quote unquote, I can at least live off this amount of money for the next 6 months. And that becomes your emergency fund. It's core to your anxiety, to your personal finance levels, to just your life, knowing that you have some money sitting somewhere. And some books and some theories will tell you put the money somewhere you cannot reach. But then my counter argument is what's money if you cannot access it? You just need that level of discipline personally. But then you need to be able to access this just in case it happens and you need it. You don't have to want to wait for a very long time to get your own money back from whichever platform you have. Anyway, moving to the final few slides. So the goal is, yes, we've budgeted, we've managed our costs, hopefully, as much as possible. We've gotten our emergency fund going. It's still building. It takes some time to build because you're essentially drawing percentages from your current income to build your future income. It takes time. But now we're looking at investing. Like I said, not here to teach you about investing, not here to show you the benefits of treasury bills because frankly, there are too many instruments out there in the system now for you to worry about just one. So let's assume, hypothetically, you make and maybe 10,000. Oh, what did I press? Shoot. I think my slide went off. Okay, give me a sec. Is my slide back? I think I pressed something.
Yes, we can actually see
Yeah,
your sign.
awesome. Thank you very much. I think we're back. So let's assume, I'm sure you make much, much more than this, but let's assume on a modest month, you make 10,000 CDs and you put 1,000 CDs in an instrument. Let's take I think I mentioned the S&P 500 in the US, or depending on which instruments you want to use there. I wouldn't use startup stock as a very stable measure. S&P just picks the top companies, top 500 companies in the US and just aggregates all the gains they make and then just gives you a flat index on an annual basis. So I think currently you could do between 8% to 15% annually. So you pick this 1,000 CDs, it's about $100 a month, and then you put it into, say, a 10% instrument. That gives you basic 10% every year. It could go higher, but then just from a point of conservation or just to be conservative, we just stick to 10%. And frankly, it's easier to calculate if it's 10%. So after 10 years, you would have contributed 120,000 CDs to whichever investment pool you decide or the instrument you decide. But then you make about 84 or 85,000 CDs just within that period. And $100 could be higher. So you put 200, automatically your money doubles. You put much more, depending on what your goals are. If you feel like I want to retire early, I want to make sure I have the structures there for me to be able to retire early. I don't mind suffering for today just to make sure I can make it tomorrow. Some people are built differently, others are built life is for the living. I want to live today. Tomorrow will figure itself out. If you're a Christian, then they give you the quote where it's like God, finds food for birds. How much more you, his children, his human beings? There are different ways to play it depending on where your interest lies and where your level of financial achievement lies. I don't mind personally. I just don't mind suffering for today, just be able to make it for tomorrow, because usually it gets much better, and at a certain point it gets much easier. So Americans will tell you life gets much easier when you make your first million. Ghana would have to find a number for that because Ghana is so bloody expensive. But you find it easier once you hit a certain level. So my policy is suffer to get to that level. And then from there, you realize you can actually take your foot off the gas and allow your money to just keep growing. So in 10 years, profit of about $85,000. 20 years, that's another 10. It's not even 2x in the 84, it's almost 4 to 5x in. Then you have about a 500,000 pool just because you were contributing and on a monthly basis, $100 or 1,000 CDs. So these are, in my opinion, how you invest. You don't need to be a crazy person looking up all these other instruments, put yourself to different levels of anxiety. You could outsource that if you want, but then seek out more stable instruments like the S&P, like the Treasury bills. US Treasury bills are about 4%, so that's not optimum. Ghanaian should be about 11 to 13. Ghana Treasury bills even is a bit finicky with what happened a few years ago with the banking sector and then the haircuts and all those things. But if you find a basic instrument that gives you 8 to 10% annually, once it's a bit more stable, and then you can now dabble in the more crazy, high risk, high return type of investors. And I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about, but for others, you could go into entrepreneurship, and then that's a lot more high risk because in the event where it doesn't happen, that's sunk costs, and you have to start again with a new set of learnings, and hopefully you don't stop there and you're able to build a successful business. But until then, if you're like me and you know you're as risk averse as they come, you find a stable place to pull your money in, and then hopefully as the years go by, it's money you don't look at, it's money you've automated, it's money you don't think about, but it's money you know you have. So in about 10 years, you sit down, you look at your portfolio, you draw up your net worth, and then you ask yourself, okay, so now I have this assets in landed property, I have this level of liquidity in the money markets, I have this level. Cars are an expense and liability, so I'm not going to count a car as an asset unless your car is making you money. And that's just me being as prudent as I can be. But I wouldn't count a car as your assets, at least because it loses value as you keep using it. And assets are supposed to generate you more income in the reverse. But yeah, in my opinion, these are I wouldn't call them little, but these are the micro steps, the micro levels of awareness we need to keep in mind for us to be able to, I'm not saying for us to be able to financially free, to be wealthy, it takes time, really. But then for you to be able to have that mind to be able to work, that clarity of thought, to be able to focus on your work, and hey, that confidence to tell your boss to get you a raise, without the fear of him or her sabotaging your career because frankly, money is just a means, to be honest. I'm sure we are driven by much bigger things than money. We're driven by career, we're driven by kids, we're driven by what the future looks like. Money just allows us to stay alive as we seek out all these things. Depending on what your religion tells you, you are driven to seek out God, you are driven to seek out different levels of spiritual enlightenment. Money just keeps you alive as you seek out these things. It makes your life a lot easier, makes you eat better food, makes you stay in shape as much as possible, or the other way as well, feeds you with a lot of junk, but it allows you to just do the things you really want to do in the long term. So it's important that once you know you have that sorted out, you can at least free up that mind to focus on, I wouldn't call them more important things, but to focus on the things that really matter to you. And hopefully the future becomes more exciting for you. The future becomes more enjoyable in your work. You begin to look at your work differently, not just a source of income, but the value you provide to people, the impact you have on different people. All these things means you are edging towards, in terms of Maslow's theory of needs, you're edging towards self-actualization because now food, security, all those things are not factors for you anymore. And now you're just edging towards what is life really made of? And that's what all the Bill Gates people start telling you, that money is not everything. But then you see how much money they have, and it's very counterintuitive, isn't it? But yeah, in my opinion, you focus on these micro steps. It doesn't have to be fail proof, but then it has to be deliberate. If you leave it on autopilot without any level of sophistication or technology to support you in leaving it on autopilot, you would always cycle back into your old habits or into, and this is for me especially, like December is coming and I'm psyching myself because I know January is right after that, and I know myself, and I might want to indulge a bit in the month of December, but at least I'm aware of what can happen in December. So if it does happen and I happen to suffer in January, I know exactly what happened in December rather than January happens and I'm joining the train of January has 50 days and it's so long and I'm broke and it's tight. It's just to be financially prudent in December to make sure I'm supported for January and of course for the other months to come. But yeah, I think this has been it for me. I'll just drop, in my opinion, a few last notes where these are just calls you take with you. Hopefully, they're as useful to you as you go through your different levels of decision making in your work and in your personal lives. But then I always say limit and manage debts. I always say debt is not, it's not a bad thing if you use it for the right thing. If you are taking money to provide higher returns for yourself, by all means, people arbitrage the market. They go for a very short-term loan, not short-term, longer-term loans have more favorable rates. So they go for a longer-term loan, and then eventually they put that money into something that gives them a higher return. And this is arbitrage means you're just taking money and play with the system using just interest rates. So their goal is to take a 4% loan and then invest it or put it in a 10% instrument. Eventually, you net out at six, and that becomes your business decision. And it buys you time, it buys you freedom to do certain things. So I'm not here telling people not to borrow. You borrow if you have to, but then you don't borrow excessively for survival. Then you end up falling into the debt trap. And it's very difficult to get out of the debt trap because you borrow from other people to pay debts and the cycle continues. And another core one is to avoid lifestyle inflation. We're all guilty of lifestyle inflation when we get any new income windfalls that come from very odd things. Somebody saw you and said you looked good today. Take this $500 and buy yourself lunch. That's a windfall. And if you do go buy the lunch of $500, I get surprised because you don't need to buy lunch for $500. You were fine with or without that money. You're better off saving it or using it to see if it can generate you a bit more income in the first place. So all these are just the micro steps. I feel like hopefully we should be more aware of, especially going forward and taking on life in its entirety. And hopefully we all come out of this. They said nobody goes through life and comes out alive, but hopefully we go through life happy and we come out satisfied with as much damage as we've done in the years. And hopefully our families are better off for it. And the best part is we at least live to enjoy the money we say we're trying to work hard for and try to save and everything. Yeah, this has been it from me. Thank you all so much. Thank you to Jacqueline for the consistent prompts. I appreciate it and happy to answer any questions you may have. If I can't answer the questions, I would essentially bounce it to somebody else or I'll tell you I'll be back. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicholas. This has been very, very insightful. If not anything at all, one thing I've taken out of it is pay yourself first whenever you receive your paycheck. There are a lot of things you've said, and I believe we will all reflect on going forward. So before we open the floor for everyone to ask their questions. I'll begin with a quick question. If there is one tool or financial management tool that is available, what will you advise that we can use immediately after the session?
Yeah. Um, well, conflict of interest. We, as a company, we invested in Affinity. So I would just say get the Affinity app. I don't know, he's not gonna pay me for getting him customers, but Affinity helps me in the sense that that has become my emergency savings pot. So that's a tool I because I use Affinity for different things, I prefer to leave my money there and then I now use the Momo for check-ins and for quick transfers and such. I would use Affinity as a good tool just to help you as much as possible to be able to figure out your emergency savings. If you want, you could put it in the money market, the stock exchange if you want, but I just want money I can access in the event of an emergency, and I prefer to put it in Affinity because their rates are good as well. They give me good rates on a quarterly basis. So for me, yeah, that's one tool. Another tool is I think the budgeting I should have brought that link with me. It's very intuitive. Like there's a tab for the whole picture where you see your entire monthly spend, and then there's another tab for your spend as you actually go through the day. So I could literally write, I had Wache for 10 CDs, watches, salad, everything took me to about 25 CDs put, and then it feeds into my dashboard. And then I put in my savings goal, I put in how much I make, I put in the things I want the money to go to. So if it's investment, and then it's all very intuitive. So the more I put data in, the bigger or the clearer my picture gets. I tried it in my first 2 months, which was sometime 2 years ago, and it was very jarring because then 2 months consecutively I was exceeding my savings goal, and then it felt demoralizing. So I stopped, but then I got back on again, and it's been great. It's at least I could look back at 2025 month on month and look at what exactly took all my money, and then I can fix that going forward. Because, like I said, what you can't measure, you can't essentially manage. So yeah, hopefully I'll share that template with you, Jacqueline, and you can share with the team if they're remotely curious. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. If you do share it, I'll gladly share it with all our audience. Now let's hear from you, our participants. If you have any question, please, you can use the virtual raise your hand button or drop it in the chat box, and I would read it out for our speaker to answer the question. I can see there are a couple here. I'll read them out to you, Nicholas. This one
Okay.
is from Kwame. He says, please, how can we assess foreign investment opportunities right here in Ghana?
Yeah. So first of all, there's the Achieve app. Achieve, they allow you to essentially save and invest. So they've recently opened up where you can invest in the tech companies in the US. I, because of my industry, I've met people who build on top of this app. So there's this platform called IBKR Global Traders. That's what Achieve is built on. So Achieve uses that to access the US stocks. So you could go VOO. VOO is essentially they just pick the top tech firms, put them together, create an index, and then they give you returns on an annual basis. You could also do the S&P 500, or you could do another startup is Bamboo, where they also allow you to do tech investments, or you can do US stocks as well. But then yeah, just based on my industry, I know what they are built on, and I went straight to the supplier, which is the IBKR. I think there's another one I can't remember their name, but I use IBKR Global Traders. It's a very long KYC process. It took me about 2 days just to get through. But once you're through and you connect your PayPal or you connect your TransferWise account to it, it's almost seamless. Money can go in and come out in days, and you can invest into any shares, Nvidia and the like.
Right. Thank you, Nicholas. Kwame, I hope this answers your question. We'll take the last question, which is from Kwame again. He says, paying yourself first is a difficult task for me because I end up putting the money back in the business. How can I do better?
I'm glad you know it's not good. I think the first step is awareness, knowing that you have to do better. The first step is knowing that it's not optimal. It's fine if you lapse a few times when you're starting, but I would say if you're paying yourself first and it's proving too difficult, try reduce the margin. At least maybe you were putting in 20% of your income and you realize that your expenses end up eating into that 20%. If you could reduce it to about 5 or 10% as you're building the muscle memory so that your body gets used to it. And then you'd be very surprised. Automatically, you widen the scope. You could end up doing 40% of your income just paying yourself first. And then you hustle for the entire month on the remaining 60% or 50%. But then I would just advise you to start very small, just build up that muscle memory. And then from there you can start to get bold. But if you start big, it would eventually, because it's a shock to your system, you've lived a certain way for a while, your body would not adjust as quickly. So it's super important to just start small. I would start from 5-10% of my income. That's if I'm earning 1,000 CDs, I pick maybe 100 CDs or 50 CDs even on a monthly basis. Surely you could build that for the next 3 months, and then you realize I've been doing 50 CDs for the past 3 months. I can do 150. Your confidence gets better as you keep giving yourself this minor dopamine rushes from achieving your targets. So yes, thank you so much for that, Kwame.
Right. Thank you so much, Nicholas. I think this is where our time will permit us to do. At this point, we will bring the curtains down. Thank you all so much for being part of today's session, and a special thank you to you, Nicholas, for breaking down financial concepts in such a practical and a relatable way for all of us. The Q&A session continues to go because of your participation and questions, your curiosity, and your willingness to learn every Monday morning. And we truly appreciate that. As always, join us the same time next week for another inspiring session as we close the volume 8 of the Constromart Knowledge and Experience series. Stay connected with us. If you have any further questions, you can follow us on LinkedIn, drop your question in the comment section, and I believe Nicholas will make time to respond to that. You can also follow our website, www.constromartafrica.com, for updates on our final episode, which comes up next week, the speakers and the resources you can use in your daily work. Wishing everyone a productive and financially smart week ahead, and see you all next week. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.